Hi everyone and welcome back. I'm Nicole. I'm a psychological therapist and nutritionist and I specialize in eating disorders. And today I want to have an honest conversation about Ozempic and similar GLP-1-like drugs like Mounjaro. You have probably heard quite a mixed bag of things, or maybe that's just my bias, but a lot of people are talking about how amazing they are for weight loss. But from my perspective, as someone who works deeply with eating disorders every day, I'm actually a little bit, probably a lot, genuinely concerned. So I've prepared an additional resource in the description where you can get a free download link so that you can clarify more about when they are recommended as a drug for weight loss. Let's explore why these drugs aren't a magical solution, especially for those struggling with binge eating disorder or emotional eating as well, or any kind of disordered eating. Just to be clear, this isn't about body shaming anyone or gaslighting people who genuinely need to lose weight for medical reasons. People absolutely deserve access to safe, effective treatment options, but I want to offer a different perspective, which is compassionate and honest for those who are unsure if now is the right time for them to pursue a medication like this. It is a question of timing, of readiness, and of doing it in a way that truly supports your health, mentally, emotionally, and physically. My intention isn't to take anything away from those who benefit, but it's to ensure that you're making this decision with your eyes wide open, rather than just doing things without your self-worth intact and without the right therapeutic or nutrition support alongside you. This is especially important if you've ever struggled with your relationship. This is especially important if you've ever experienced any difficulties with your relationship with food or your body. First, let's talk facts. Ozempic and Mounjaro belong to a group of medications known as GLP-1 receptor agonists. Originally, these drugs were specifically designed to treat type 2 diabetes, to help regulate blood sugar levels, and also essentially mimicking a natural hormone in our bodies that makes insulin release. So an interesting side effect discovered during their use for diabetes was a significant amount of weight loss. This is why it's become so popular in society. This happens primarily through appetite suppression, reducing hunger and promoting a feeling of fullness much sooner during meal times and whilst eating. These medications are taken via injection commonly. Ozempic, for example, typically comes as a pre-filled injection pen that you self-administer once a week, usually injected under the skin of the stomach, your thigh, or even your upper arm. Relatively, it is simple to use, which contributes to its growing popularity. Dosages usually start low and gradually tend to increase over several weeks to minimize the side effects and maximize people's ability to tolerate the drug. Typically, GLP-1 medications are prescribed for extended periods of times, months, or even years, but they're mainly to manage chronic health conditions related to diabetes or significant obesity. Let's get into a little bit more of why this can be tricky. The NHS has clear and strict criteria for who qualifies for these medications. Normally, your GP will prescribe them to you only if you have type 2 diabetes or specific obesity-related health conditions that haven't responded to traditional treatments like dietary and lifestyle changes. Despite these restrictions on people who can get the drug, many people are turning to private prescriptions. And so this often means that they're using GLP-1 drugs without the necessary support from healthcare professionals trained in psychological and nutritional guidance for the drug. This is a huge lack of oversight, which can lead to serious issues, particularly for people prone to or already struggling with disordered eating or an eating disorder. Without proper emotional, psychological, and nutritional support, these drugs can unintentionally reinforce unhealthy eating behaviors or emotional coping mechanisms. It is essential to fully understand these medications because they're not intended to be used for general weight loss. This does pose a lot of risks involved, especially when accessed outside of the traditional healthcare professional framework. So let's look at the side effects, and here's where things start to get really interesting, because people aren't usually told the whole story, and there's a lot of research to sift through to fully understand what it means. While these drugs do sound appealing, because of their rapid weight loss effects, it's crucial we talk openly about these side effects that are found in many different studies. Usually there are the physical effects that a lot of people feel: nausea, vomiting, stomach pain, constipation, and also diarrhea. And these tend to be most intense in the early weeks. But what really concerns me as a psychological therapist is that we're not talking about the psychological impacts. These side effects can be just as, and if not more, significant than the physical ones, especially for people who already use food to manage their emotions. What happens when you remove that coping tool with a mechanism that suppresses your appetite? What happens when you remove that coping tool with a medication that suppresses your appetite? And another question to ask is, what happens when you no longer eat because you've made peace with food, but because you physically can't stomach it? That's where the conversation around Ozempic, Mounjaro, GLP-1 drugs become deeply psychological and potentially dangerous for people with unresolved emotional relationships with food. A recent 2025 study by Calas, published in the Journal of Comparative Effectiveness Research, investigated psychological outcomes among people who have taken GLP-1 medications like Ozempic and Mounjaro. The study found that while many participants did experience weight loss, a substantial subset reported increased symptoms of anxiety, low mood, and even suicidal ideation. This finding is particularly relevant, especially in the context of eating disorders. For people who have used food as a way to manage overwhelming emotions, perhaps since childhood or throughout their life, suddenly removing that coping tool through appetite suppression can leave them emotionally raw. Without adequate emotional regulation skills in place, the void can result in intense psychological distress. This may explain why sudden suicidality is appearing in the data. It's not simply a reaction to the drug's biochemistry, but also a reflection of what happens when someone is forced to sit with difficult emotions they have never ever been taught to manage. This is precisely why emotional preparedness, therapeutic support, and psychological scaffolding must accompany any decision to start these medications, especially for individuals with a history of binge eating, emotional eating, or trauma-related to food behaviors. When emotional eating or binge eating behaviors are disrupted by a medication, people are left without using their usual coping mechanism. Potentially, this leads to very intensified emotional distress. But beyond the psychological report, we also need to talk about the nutrition. Imagine your appetite is suppressed, you've taken the GLP-1 medication, and now you no longer have an appetite. A lot of people start to report skipping meals altogether or drastically reducing their food intake. This obviously helps with the weight loss, but over time, this will be leading to inadequate nutritional consumption, vitamin and mineral deficiencies, and muscle loss, particularly if clients or people's behaviors, particularly if meals are unbalanced or sparse. This is especially dangerous for individuals who are recovering from eating disorders, who often struggle with maintaining sufficient intake and nutritional variety. One of the key findings in a 2023 report by Bartel, which was published in the Journal of Managed Care and Specialty Pharmacy, found that individuals with disordered eating histories who took GLP-1 medications were more likely to experience nutritional compromise and gastrointestinal complications. Nutritional compromise included deficiencies in key micronutrients like vitamin B12, iron, and folate, as well as reductions in protein intake that risked muscle loss. Gastrointestinal complications range from delayed gastric emptying, chronic nausea, and bloating to more severe issues such as bowel obstruction or malabsorption symptoms. These effects were more severe when the drug was without concurrent dietetic reports. When the drug was used without concurrent dietetic support. Without professional guidance, many individuals failed to consume enough essential nutrients or ignored warning signs like fatigue, dizziness, and hair loss. This signals deep nutritional issues. The authors emphasize the importance of integrating registered dietitians and nutritionists into the prescribing and follow-up process to ensure nutritional adequacy and reduce the likelihood of these complications. As a nutritionist and psychotherapist, I cannot stress this enough. Nutritional care is an essential part of the conversation. Clients need guidance on how to build meals that meet their needs despite reduced appetite, how to maintain balanced eating across the day, and to watch for warning signs of malnourishment, and even restrictive eating patterns starting to re-emerge. This is why involving a nutritional professional before starting GLP-1 medication, especially for those with a history of disordered eating, is not just helpful, it's essential. Thank you so much for tuning in today. If this video gave you something to think about or helped you feel a little bit more informed, please give it a share it with someone who might need it, and hit subscribe. I'm Nicole, a psychological therapist and nutritionist specializing in eating disorders, and I'm here to help you make decisions that feel good for you and your body and your mind. You can also download the free resource linked in the description to guide you further. Take care and see you next time.